Saludos, mi gente. I'm Victoria Leandra. I'm a journalist and host based in New York City, but born and raised in Puerto Rico. So shout out to all the Boricuas that are watching. Thank you for being here tonight with us. We have put together an amazing discussion that we're so looking forward to share with you. Today is about getting real. Yes, there has been a lot of progress made in terms of women in power, but there's still so much more work to be done. So today, to do that, we want to discuss a few wins that we've had this year. For example, Sarah McBride became the first transgender state senator in the US this year. AOC just got reelected. She is the youngest woman in Congress ever, and she happens to be Latina. Cori Bush, she just got elected this year too. She is the first Black woman elected to represent Missouri in Congress. Another fact that really represents the power of women and the power of numbers when we go out to vote, when we show up for our community, especially Black women, especially Latina women, is Richie Torres, a Democrat who just won the New York's 5th congressional district. He is the first gay Afro-Latino, openly gay Afro-Latino in Congress. So again, it just goes to show that when we unite and we go out there and we show up, we make a difference. And last but not least, Teresa Leger Fernandez, she is another Democrat in her 3rd district. And that, with her win, it means that New Mexico's entire House delegation is made up of women of color. Imagine 20 years ago, this was not the case. Imagine everything that we can achieve together if we continue this trend going forward in the next few years. For this conversation, I want to definitely thank Conciencia Collective for putting it together, as well as mitú. Because of you, it's that we are here, and because of you, us the space to talk about this and not only celebrate the wins, but also to really see and acknowledge how we can move forward and continue these wins and definitely create some progress in our society. So to do that today, we have an amazing set of individuals who are joining me tonight. And first off is Rosette and Manu. Rosette is a songwriter, actress, and dancer. She was born in Miami, but is Texas-based, and she is currently working on her debut EP that comes out in spring 2021, Torso Tales. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Joining us tonight is also Manu Manso. She is a singer and songwriter born in Venezuela. She was nominated to the Latin Grammys that just happened this past week, but she was nominated in 2015 in the category of Best New Artist with her EP, independent EP, Como Soy. How are you?
Happy to be here. How are you?
Good. We're excited for you both to join us and basically discuss a little bit of your experiences, because Manu, you are from Latin America. Rosette, you are biracial. You're a Black identifying woman in the US, and those are two different experiences, but experiences that are not often talked about in the mainstream media. We hear about Black women, and we think about them as numbers. Same as Latina women, we think about them as numbers and the power that they have in their society when it comes to voting, but we don't get to see their faces and really get to know a little bit more in depth about the issues that matter to them. So today I want to talk about equality. I want to talk about diversity in the workplace in each of our industries. For you, it's the music industry. For me, it's the media industry, etc. So let's talk a little bit about the quotes that you've chosen today for this talk. Rosette, let's start with you.
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm so grateful to be here. Truly, it's just such a great thing to be a part of in this time, especially. My quote was inspired by I love the idea of really remembering where we come from and remembering my roots. So this was just basically about, the other women that have paved the way for opportunity for women like me to really actualize my dreams. So I really feel like if we can continue that, it would be just epic and only up from here. So that's that was the inspiration behind the quote.
Who are some of the women that in your eyes paved the way for you to be here and for you to be where you are today in the industry?
Oh, I mean, Tina Turner, Diana Ross, Sade, Erykah Badu, Beyonce. There's so many to name, but I think that I really connect to Tina Turner's experience the most. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Manuel, talk about your quote. Assuming it's a little bit different, tell me a little bit more about it. What inspired you to share that quote with us?
Yeah. Well, my quote is coming up somewhere. I just always have such a hard time with quotes because I'm like, what do I want to say? But basically, as you had mentioned earlier, like I think women in every field had just gotten to a point where we have proved ourselves already in a way that we should have never had to, but we have already proven ourselves to be as powerful and as we can be, more than it is accepted and wanted from us. And it's just, we're already present, so I always think that there comes to a point where you just really can't ignore it anymore. It's like, it's there, it's present, we're making changes, we're doing things that years ago we weren't doing and we couldn't do, we weren't allowed to. And now it's just like, we're already here and it's only going to keep going and growing. And you just can't deny that anymore. I feel like that space for people to be like, oh, women can't do this or women can't be this or this and that, like that's over and canceled. We can do literally anything we want, anything in this world. And yeah, that's kind of like where the quote came from, just from thinking like, we're all here, we're already present, you see us, bro, you can't ignore it. Like, you'll see more,
Love it. What are some of the things that you would say someone like your grandma, for example, couldn't do in Venezuela and now you're getting to do in the US? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I feel like funny that you bring up my grandma, because my grandma's like one of my biggest role models ever. She was such a hardworking woman and really fought for her beliefs and always fought to be like respected because of her abilities, not like her beauty or all these other things that we also have that are, part of our power. But I just think that now we're more accepted to do anything, like even that, being the boss like of a company, and being like, I'm here because I'm able, not because I fucked my way to the top or hung out with this person. No, it's like, I'm here because I am capable of having this position and managing it. So I guess like those kind of things, there's many different examples, but even just like voting, like women couldn't vote. And now we have a vice president who's a woman, and that's awesome.
Exactly. And talking about women who are bosses and killing it in their fields, I want to introduce our expert tonight, Laura Marquez. She is the global lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion policy of Google. And prior to that, ladies and gentlemen, Laura was based in Washington, D.C., where she served in the Obama administration. So talk about power.
Power. What a word. When I think about, so I worked in the Obama administration. I had the opportunity to work in the U.S. House of Representatives as well. I'm now at Google, where I work as our global lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. And so having walked in these different halls of power, if you would, I think sometimes women don't fully own the power that they have inside themselves. And that's what I'm really hoping that we can have a conversation around today, is just knowing our worth, knowing our value, and understanding. I love what Manu had to say about we can't deny it anymore. The over and cancel that we know women can do anything. And I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. And I really want to thank the Conciencia Collective for bringing us together for this conversation.
And I just love seeing the screen, because it's not often that I get to see 4 women of color together holding space and really owning their power. Like you just said, it's oftentimes I found myself to be oftentimes the only in a space or the only at the table. So now I think that we've created our own table to discuss the things that we want to discuss. And this is a perfect example of that. Now let's dive into the discussion itself. Women of color in power, and how we've of course done so much in the past few years, but how there's so much more to be done. I want to first acknowledge some female artists and executives who, like Rosette said, paved the way for us to be here. Some of them being Celia Cruz, Ivy Queen, who we just saw at the Latin Grammys. It was so amazing to see her back in that stage. And of course, Goyo. She was named one of the leading ladies of entertainment in the Latin Grammys. And she was actually the first Afro-Latina to be awarded this recognition. I spoke to her earlier for the Americano this week, and I said, it's so sad that we had to wait until 2020 for this to happen. An Afro-Latina should have won this award way before. What do we think about acknowledgements like this that sometimes come a little bit later than they should have come?
I mean, I feel like it's just the system, the education system, the representation, lack of representation. And now that we're seeing that, there's this plant of freedom that's like growing within all of us here today, like on this call. It's just, I think that it's a really beautiful thing to see. We're seeing more of it because of the media. There are a lot of people who have been kind of underwater, like doing their thing. So, I mean, yeah, I actually have a few friends that were dancing at the Grammys, and it was just so beautiful to see all of their expressions and how they're just paving the way for the dance community in Miami, where I'm from. So it's just like, it's so encouraging. Yeah.
Totally. And talking about more women of color in power, we just elected Kamala Harris to be the first woman vice president of the US. Again, it's sad that it took until 2020 to see the first woman vice president and a woman holding that office. But what does it mean for you? Where were you when the news came? How did you feel? How did the young kids in your family feel, especially the young, the little ones? I saw a lot of pictures online of just being proud to see themselves in the TV and see themselves hopefully in that position in the future.
For just anyone?
I okay.
So I was like, I'll go.
I don't
Anyone.
For me, how many? I don't remember how many days it was. I feel like that was a chunk of. I don't even know how many days it was. Literally, because I was trying to figure out what the situation was. Yeah. I think it's so dope that going from, I mean, these 4 crazy years with like this person in power that just was dividing and just, really putting like the knife in the middle to really divide the country and people with different views. And then having a new president, and then also getting a woman as a vice president that has never happened before, a woman of color. I feel like it would be so cool for like the younger kids. I have a niece and a nephew. And just like for my niece to be like, what we were saying, representation, that shit matters. If you don't see it in front of you, you don't think you could do it. Like, it's like, I was inspired by so many success stories of artists that are like, hey, follow your dreams. You can do it. If I did it, you can do it. And if you don't have that, even if you think it, even if people around you are like, hey, you could do it, you don't see it, you're like, maybe I can, yes, but like, they don't look like me, it's like, I don't, like, how can I even think that I could do it when no one else has done it? And that, I mean, of course, it always takes one person for that, but that's why that's so important. And I think it's such a great moment now, from like going from one end of the spectrum to like another, of being, okay, we're bringing it back and we have a woman. And that's just, I think that it was the best ending for those horrible couple of days that I feel like everyone went through, and also for this crazy year. So at least we're like, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like next year might not be so bad. This next year's might not be so shitty, at least because we have those things and young girls, I'm sure, everywhere. I mean, I felt like that. This is dope. You know, this is just we're even though you feel like the progress hasn't been made, and I myself was a little discouraged just like seeing the results and all of that, then you're like, okay, no, it's working. We can, you know, let's keep it going and let's keep it moving.
So I'd love to talk about this one from more of my personal views here. And I'm gonna take you back to 2005 and then compare it to 2020. I was working in the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives in 2005. And at the time, I just started a new job. I was a legislative director for a Latino member of Congress who'd just been elected. And out of 535 members, that's on the House side, and then the 100 senators, so 535 total, I was the only Latino or Latina legislative director in the entire U.S. Congress, working for a member of Congress at that time. And shortly after, there were others that followed that year. But it's just that you realize, like, working in an institution like that, an institution of power, how important representation is. You can't necessarily see what you can't be, what you can't see. And now 15 years later, to have Senator Harris now as the vice president-elect, I'm just so incredibly, I'm thrilled. I'm over the moon. I was here in my house, my living room, when they called the election. And it wasn't until that moment that I actually, I had to pinch myself, right? Tears in my eyes, that we're at this moment in time. And I'm so proud. I'm so proud of her for persevering.
We're definitely seeing history in the making. I know that you work at Google. Can you tell me a little bit more about the searches during that time? Do you know if there was a shift in the searches at Google during the election and in the night in which it was called? Not the night, the morning, actually. I remember where it was.
You know, I wasn't monitoring the search trends. That's a really interesting one. I'll have to go back and take a look. But I know that across the board at the company, we had individuals who were monitoring what was happening. But I think from my perspective, I was just glued to the TV and watching the returns. I had a friend over here with me that night, and she's done a lot of work in Congress as well. And so we were glued to the TV, I think, like most Americans and people across the world.
How about you, Rosette? Where were you when it all happened?
I was actually visiting my family in Miami. I haven't been in Miami for a year. So I found out when I was home in my hometown, and I was actually at one of my friend's house, and she has a 4-year-old daughter. And my friend, she's Colombian, and and the father is Jamaican. So seeing her daughter kind of like see her mom celebrate, and both of us being able to celebrate in the same room was just really beautiful. I'm still processing it, you know. It's still just a daily process. As we know, there's still a bit of time before certain, you know, policies can be in motion, but it's just, there's so much work to be done, but I'm so grateful that there's more representation.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you were in Miami. Florida has been sort of like the focus point.
Notice I said Miami, and I was like, I'm from Miami.
We're not Florida. I'm like,
we don't claim Florida.
We're Miami.
Love it. Well, how was Miami that day? Like, what was going on? Did you go outside Miami to check it out? What did you do?
Well, due to COVID, there was very limited things that we could do.
Right.
But my friend who is a singer, I went to go see her perform, and I was actually on the outside of a gay bar, and we were just like drinking water because we're grandmas and we go to sleep really early, and we were ready for the party and all that. But it was just beautiful because the community was just like waving the flag around and just like in celebration before we even found out. They were like, oh, I know, honey, like just in it, you know. And that's what I needed to see was that type of energy. So that, I don't know, that's kind of what it was like when I was there.
And I think a lot of the media has focused in Florida, but they have failed to realize and really pay attention to the big picture. And the big picture is that Latinos turned out in historic numbers this year, as well as Black voters turned out in historic numbers. In Arizona, they flipped the state, the same as they did in Pennsylvania, for example. Tell me a little bit more about this change in how some states have voted in the past few years and how people of color did.
Well, I think, again, from my personal views here, but this has been a long time coming, with huge change in demographics, with, again, putting on my political hat here, the investments that were made early on for a ground game to get people out to vote. And this is civic participation, and it's part of our duty, our civic responsibility as Americans. And so I think just across the board, given everything that's happening as well with the pandemic, was just a real, like, an urgency, a sense of urgency for people to get out and vote and make sure that their voices were heard. And I just personally am so heartened by the fact that Americans did it in such high numbers despite the conditions of the pandemic.
Exactly. That's extremely important to note. And I love how the discussion is a little bit divided in the politics area and the music area. And this question is perfect for that, because music, entertainment, and politics are now very intertwined. And sometimes you don't even realize the difference between the two. We see how artists like Lizzo and Cardi B have been super vocal about politics and how they've actually made people turn out to vote and actually go and register to vote. Tell me a little bit more about this shift that we have seen in the industry, that now I feel like sometimes artists are expected to say something, because if they don't, sometimes the fans come after them. Rosé and Manu, tell me a little bit more about it.
I feel like that's such a, like, damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of thing. Like, it's happened to me personally. As like, I am very vocal about everything, but I'm very vocal with my not necessarily, I don't want to say political views, more so my humanitarian, like, on life in general, just like those things, I can't do it. And I've actually gotten told many times, be like, hey, like, don't give your political, opinion too much. Like, that might just, like, you're an artist, like, let it breathe. But I think as human beings, we all have the duty to, like, especially if you have a platform, to educate and to share. And if it's something positive, more power to you, And, like, I love that these artists are who the kids follow, they're not really out here, like, looking at the news, and, like, I'm sure some are, but not usually. You're seeing your artists, these are your role models, people you want to be like, and then you see them raising their voice and actually speaking, like, some facts, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And that changes, their mind, or not even changes, just, like, helps shape their opinion when it's a great opinion. So I think anyone with a platform should express themselves and be able to use their power for something greater. And I think a lot of the reason why younger people went out and voted was because of these conversations that are not so proper. It's more like, okay, you're seeing an artist who's just speaking however they speak all the time. Like Cardi goes on there and she's not like,
yes,
that's my political hat.
I love it. I love it.
And that's cool because you get it, like, younger people get it. Sometimes they can say something super educated and you're like, wait, but, like, went right over my head. And then you see the perspective and you're like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So
right. And sometimes people who were not politically involved or didn't care about politics now are interested because they see someone like Cardi B or someone like Bad Bunny, for example. He has done a lot of of outreach and has spoken a lot about what has happened in Puerto Rico. And I've directly seen how it has affected and really turn out people to vote. Tell me a little bit more about your views, Rosette, about how basically artists have now this huge microphone into what goes on in our country.
It's been really nice to see artists like Lizzo, Cardi B, and many others. I mean, almost every artist that I follow or love is very loud about their political views. And I follow them because of that. Because like Manu was saying, I'm a part of that, a part of that young, youth. We're part of that where it's like we want to hear about things in a way that doesn't cause so much anxiety in the body or doesn't cause so much intensity that we already experience. Especially for me as a Black woman, the trauma that I am just now processing in this past year. I mean, that's been my main focus, is let me heal myself before I start telling people what to do with themselves. So I love to speak with my art first versus my Twitter handle versus things. And that's just a preference. That's just for my own health, so that in the future, or as time goes on, as I, continue to work on my mental health, my experiences, and just this whole uproar of media surrounding our lives, it's just been overwhelming. But as an artist, there is that pressure to say something. And I think there's many languages, there's many communities that communicate in many different ways. So it's been so nice to see how everyone's exercising and using their platform in the way that's like healthiest for them. So.
I love what you say about it being healthy, because sometimes you feel pressure to do it, but perhaps that's not the best thing to do for you and for mental health, like you're saying. We saw how people like, for example, Bad Bunny, they showed themselves registering to vote and actually go to vote, and basically also artists endorsing candidates. And it's sort of this in a way, now at least in the Latino community, the candidates are really looking out for these endorsements. Laura, what do you think about this? We've seen it in with Obama when he invited J Balvin. We've seen it with Biden playing Bad Bunny songs. Tell me a little bit more about how musicians and artists really, from the point of view of politicians, do they care, or do they do it because they want to resonate with the communities that they're speaking to?
I mean, I think that there's always a desire to be able to, when you go out and speak to a community, to have someone there alongside you that's from that community as well, that can help you better understand, relate, just have a better understanding of what's going on the ground. And so when I think about, we call them surrogates. So it would be working with a celebrity to do an event. It's got to be the right fit at the end of the day. And to what Rosette was saying, and Manu, just around people that they believe strongly in something, they want to be there to endorse a candidate that they truly believe in. It's not always the right fit at the end of the day, and so you're always looking for like a good pairing, if you would. But it's important also from a community perspective, because it helps people get engaged who may not have been involved in the process before, and so that's why I think it's important from a civic engagement perspective, getting people out to vote for the first time, getting them excited about participating in our great American democracy. And I don't think we could ask for more than that in an environment like this.
And talking about civic engagement, after 2016, after Trump's win, we saw how it was the year of women, because most women were elected to hold office in recent years. What do you think was sort of the pivotal moment in which women said, you know what, I can hold that office. I am no longer staying behind the scenes, but actually putting myself in front of these mics and really speaking for our communities? When do you think that happened, and why, or not only when do you think that happened, but also why that happened?
I feel like the Obama administration had so many incredible women leaders. Just when I think about Susan Rice, I think about Samantha Power. I could go on and on. And then Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and all that she's done to inspire women as a leader, as a mother, as somebody who has represented so many different types of communities. So I can't necessarily point to one moment. It's just this culmination of seeing woman leader after woman leader step up in different ways. And I think we're in the midst of another historic moment with Vice President-elect Harris.
I love that. And I think there's also a lot of ways to get involved. It doesn't, if you don't want to run for office, that doesn't mean that you're not doing your civic duty, right? It starts from donating, to registering to vote, to volunteering, to being a poll worker, to running for office, and then everything that is in the midst of it all. For the rest of you, how do you become involved? How have you become involved? Has it been through your platform? Has it been behind the scenes? Can you tell me a little bit more about the way in which you've done so?
Well, for me, I prepare for this almost every year. Obviously, we all do. So I'm a director and I'm a writer. So what I do is, as an artist, I make sure that every piece of my work is appropriate for the times. So like, I don't, as much as maybe in my earlier years, I made a lot of like super fun, like cute songs that were about living my life and just whatever I knew at the time. But as I got older and I started to really process like what is actually going on and how it impacts my life and my community, I started to, it didn't even feel like I had a choice. It was like an obligation in my body to have to create something about what's happening in our country and reflecting that. So the way that I've gotten involved is making sure that if anyone comes to my platform, they're going to be educated through anything I do. And if it's not with my voice, like live on my IG, because I'm, still processing certain experiences regarding my experience, like in the industry and just being public figure, like all that stuff is just really difficult. But I know what isn't difficult is just speaking the truth, and however I can find the way to do that, I do that. Yeah. So.
And Manu, you've done the same with your music. And your latest single, you said "No more rigamarole," because I was tired of I'm quoting you, because I was tired of feeling stuck in this repetitive loop of injustice and misinformation. I wanted to be heard, and with the current state of society, I know much of the world feels exactly the same. What led you to say this and be so open about stuff like this?
Well, I would love to be transparent with you right now, because there's more to that quote that had more to do with just my own personal mental health. A year ago, I started intensive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy for PTSD and BPD. And it had to do with my experience as a woman in the industry when I was younger, like a teen. And so as this year came along and I knew that I wanted to release music, I had many, as you know, Mana, you probably have tons of songs in your laptop just sitting there, and it's like, what is the best way to respond? So rigmarole pretty much started as just like rage that I started to kind of project onto my family, my friends, because I didn't agree with their views, or whatever it was. I just was like, no, there has to be unity. Before unity, there has to be truth. It's just so much. I became obsessed with that. And it turned into rigmarole, just the idea of like, no more discrimination, no more being afraid to talk about mental health, and that being something that is, only spoken of among certain class. There's just so much to it, like that needs to be unpacked. But that's pretty much what inspired the quote. Just being in a loop and going on social media as an artist, and as a Black artist at that struggles with her mental health, is just trying to find a community in which you can still be heard people like Kamala Harris, she's actualizing her dream and embracing her mother and her daughters on live TV. Like, that's a beautiful thing for our community to see, that it's not just rage, there's more. It's not just, so.
And I think it's like you said, like, this is the beginning of the conversation, and at least this year was where we're all unpacking all of this, but it's been years in the making, so there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot to learn and unlearn. For you, Manu, Laura, what is something that you've had to unlearn about women and how it relates to women in power specifically? What is something that you've had to unlearn this year or in a previous year?
So this year it's been a difficult one, and thank you, Rosette, for sharing that your comments on mental health and your story. This, I think, has been such a tough year for so many people, and it's really important that we can talk about issues around mental health. I think for me, what I've really had to do in this time, it's unlearning. It's because I'm always on the go, always working. Even after I get home, I'm normally still working late until the night. And this year in particular, in the midst of this crisis, I just really had to take a step back and unlearn those habits and find space to be more kind to myself and take time to do the things that I need to stay mentally healthy in this environment. Because I'm in my house. I live by myself with my dog, and I think that there are so many people right now that are just isolated. And so, Rosette, again, thank you for raising that. I think it's really important that we be able to talk about that in our community, because mental health is one of those things that we just normally don't discuss.
Thank you.
I'm thinking things I've had to unlearn a lot.
Or something to learn.
I think because this year has been very weird for everyone. But I think, I guess, going back to just women in the workplace and things that I've had to unlearn that te cuesta a little bit sometimes. It's just and it's a very cliche thing, but that whole thing that it's if you're too assertive, then you're a fucking bitch. If you're too confident about something and you're vienes bien a la mesa with your whole thing figured out, then you're this. And those are behaviors that I catch myself being okay, maybe I'm gonna stay quiet and not say anything. And then I'm no, wait, say it. Why are you thinking that? And it goes back to all those things that we've heard since we're little. And those have been habits and thoughts that I've really had to unlearn this year, and to really step into my power and being no, you're not being a bitch. You're just speaking your mind, and giving your opinion. And we've just been programmed, sadly, without even thinking about it, or maybe wanting to, just because of media and life in general, to bring it down, turn it down a notch. Don't look too pretty, because then they're not going to respect you, because for some reason you can't be beautiful and brilliant. You have to pick, and it's no, you don't.
Yes.
You can be both. And I think those are just those little things.
Yes. I love it. Yeah.
And I think too is about what you said about us being programmed. You were born in Venezuela. Tell me a little bit more about the fact that, for all women, it's not the same for all women to grow into the woman they want to be, because not all women have the resources to do that. And it really depends a lot on where you were born, where you went to school, etc. Society is not equitable in that way. Can you tell me a little bit more about how hard it is for women of color, and for Latinas specifically, in Venezuela, to break barriers and to really grow into the woman they want to become, even when they don't have much resources?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because I was raised there. I lived until I was 10, so I didn't really experience too much of my womanhood over there. I lived in Miami, but coming from there and then coming here, I feel like in our countries, in South America, a lot, we still experience a lot of racism when you're darker, you know, and like people, I know in the US as well, but I feel like we're even more behind in a lot of those thoughts, especially when it's women, because it's not really too much with men, it's more with girls. And it's like, if I start to think, as you were mentioning earlier, of in the Latin industry, which doesn't happen in the American market as much, like for women, like women are in the charts, like killing it. And there's so many women artists that are huge, and women of color as well. Whereas in the Spanish Latin market, not really. And you don't really have that many women of color if you really think about it, you know? Like I can literally name you a couple, and it's like Goyo, which you named, and a little bit here and there, but we don't really have that. And I just think that it comes from that weird concept of racism, you know, that comes from like, I don't know, people just are on a different thought process and see things differently. Especially, you just said, okay, Florida, you know, a lot of people voted for the opposite side, and I've seen it here with like people that are Latin that shouldn't be racist, because I'm like, have you looked at yourself in the mirror? Like, what are you doing? You know? But it's like a weird thing that we have, and I just think that slows the process down for women, especially when you don't have that many resources to get there, you know? Yeah.
And I think it takes, at least from my perspective, I think it takes a Latina at the table to point out the fact that we're still lacking in some areas. So say Laura and I, who are in media, it's often few Latinas, and then it's often fewer Afro-Latinas. So what I've started to do is say, hey, why do we have an Afro-Latina in the team? And it's weird, like people ask, like, why are you asking, like, where is this coming from? But when we're talking about representation, sometimes we don't realize that representation means intersectionality, because someone who is Latina, like a white-looking Latina, doesn't experience the same things that an Afro-Latina does. So sometimes we have to ask those hard questions, the Latinas who are in the table, to sort of bring the others that are still missing in these places of power. Laura, can you tell me a little bit more about this in the corporate world, at least?
Yeah, I mean, first, I'd love to speak about it personally, just in terms of, I think that's something, there are things that we can do as individuals to help each other along. And Victoria, the example that you gave about just asking the question, why isn't there enough Latina on the team? Those are really important things that we can do as individuals. And then I love this idea of like a sisterhood of women of color, and being able to lift each other up in ways that our mothers, and I mean, certainly not my grandmother was a farm worker, but to have like from like in a place like this where we can really work to amplify each other's voices, the work that we're doing, lift each other up in a way that it just brings everyone along in the process. From a corporate perspective, I can tell you from the work that we're doing at Google, we're working very hard to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across the company. And we're really thinking about it holistically. Mature programming that is focused on everything from how we source candidates to the hiring process to promotions and the performance reviews that we do internally, really thinking and looking across the board at how it can be done more equitably. And this is how we're going to make progress as a whole. The other thing that we're doing at Google is looking at how we can better support our internal community of Googlers. Again, even it's more important than ever in this environment to be thinking about how we're working, supporting Googlers, women of color, people of color, and they have such an important role to play in how our company, how we deliver our products and platform to the world.
And then talking a little bit more about your experiences, what are some of the barriers that you've encountered in your different industries, and how have you dealt with them, and how are you looking forward to breaking those barriers? Because we're here not to stay calladitas, like we got to speak up. Anyone can go.
I know I went on a whole rant, so I was just allowing Manu to maybe say something.
This is the space for rants.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Rants
You
are
didn't have to
welcome.
you only got to tell me once. Don't tell me to rant. People know I got more mouth.
All right, so let's go.
Barriers, man. I mean, it's like all I see is just a whole list drop down in front of my face, and I'm just like, okay, there's just this exhaustion that comes over me about that. But I think within our industry, what I would like to see is it being just mandatory for there to be art therapists on every team, like just there to. I think they started to have them on set in the film industry, especially when there is a Black woman or a Latin woman. Or male playing a character embodying trauma, a character that embodies trauma, and like what that feels like to feel that history in your body and then play the character as like a 15-year-old. Like, how would they go through so many emotions on camera while being filmed without there being some support of what's actually going on? And I think the same goes for musicians and artists. It's like, being watched, putting yourself out there, being so exposed, and that being a part of how we can become successful, how we pretty much our only option, it feels like, to become successful is to really push ourselves on media, even if you don't want to. So that is the new metric. I don't think it's the healthiest, but I think it's also a really beautiful thing because you can reach so many people. So I want to break that barrier within the industry. It's like really like the business world being able to really communicate well with the artist world, and like that they are diving into, I am diving into my emotions to produce something that you and I can profit from. So let's speak of it based off of that. Like, this is what this is. I know it's a product. I know it's a song. I know it's a video. I know these things. And it's a scrape to get there too. It's not like when you put out a song, people are like, do you make money now? Like, no, not at all. It takes years, So there's so many side hustles we have to do in many industries. I'm sure this is the case. So many layers, but I would say that that's kind of where I want to start, which is why I speak about health so much.
I think I love that. That's amazing, because truth, I feel like the one thing that I always hang on to, and I know I already said it, but within my industry and like things that I've experienced, and I've been very blessed to always be protected. But I think as a woman and as young girls in the industry, and like for any girls that are watching that have like, these dreams of doing these things, like you really don't have to do anything inappropriate with anyone to get something, and I think that's really like a thing that's not spoken about enough, because they sell you these dreams and these things, and it's not true, and like they just take advantage of artists, young women that have dreams and want these things and are like, hey, fuck, but if I don't do this, and like they're gonna close the door, and like people are ruthless, especially speaking from music and entertainment, like only music side. It's like people are literally ruthless and it's horrendous. And those are kind of like something that I constantly try to speak on and work and talk to other people and work on, even for myself, of just being like, okay, don't maybe portray yourself in a way where people might get the wrong idea, which you shouldn't, because you could act however you want. But it's a matter of like, until we get there, taking those precautions. But those are the barriers that I want to just be like, okay, no, like you don't have to do absolutely anything weird that you don't want to do just because someone's telling you they're going to fuck over your career, or they're going to put you onto something, or they're going to do this. Like, you literally don't, and it's not real, and like, don't fall for it, because You know, where some are more susceptible to those things than others, to falling for it, and especially when you're not protected and have people around you that are, you know, taking care of you and have your best interests at heart. As she said, like, you know, it's like business is one thing, art is another, and they coexist, but they have nothing really to do much with each other other than the fact that they coexist and need one another for profit. You know, so
I appreciate you saying this so much. I really do.
Yeah.
It's like hitting home for me when you talk about just not having to do certain things to be able to get ahead. I mean, it's just, especially growing up in Miami, I mean, you know that how quickly young women, since we're speaking about women, how quickly they can grow up. And especially what Miami tends to be about sometimes in the media is like, you know, vacation and like throwing money on girls. Like there's so much stigma around that. And that's where I grew up. So, and in the industry. So it's just the amount of experiences you come across when just trying to put your music out is, it's rough, and wanting to feel beautiful, but also there's just so much balancing to do and so many things that need to be combated still. And I would say one of my other barriers is that I want to break down, and I would speak about it more when I was younger because I was facing it more head on. And as I got older, I wanted to focus on other things, but it had a lot to do with strengthening laws in the music industry for minors and how they're just like, oh, come to the studio being super young. And then it's really rough. So I hope we should talk about that together. You know, we need to connect, Mama. Yeah.
This is what this is for: connecting, building community, like we had said in the beginning. And I think a lot of it is about the image of what it means to be a woman and what you're expected to do as a woman. And then when women go against that, people feel fearful of that. Like, for example, when Lizzo embraces her body and simply shows her body, it's, oh my God, this is the latest that Lizzo did. Well, it's just another bikini picture. What's so newsworthy, right? Or like when Cardi B gets on IG live and just speaks as she would, what's so newsworthy? It's she's speaking freely and she's being herself, and it's something. It's sad that sometimes we see women being herself being sort of targeted, when in reality that shouldn't be the case. We should be allowed to be ourselves as men are, quite frankly.
Absolutely. And I'll speak from my perspective in terms of barriers that I've experienced and I've seen for others, is just this whole idea of mentorship and finding someone who can, especially in the industries that we're in, where there are so few women of color, 1% of Latina. For tech, 1% of employees are Latina. Like that's the stat overall for tech. So finding somebody that can help you think through, maneuver through difficult situations, think about how to really set yourself up for success in your career. I think I hear some of that with Rosette, you and Manu talking through like the trials that you've gone through in the music industry. So one of the things that I'd love to see is a stronger way for us to be able to provide mentorship to each other. And what's interesting is when I think about my career, the people who have actually been the best mentors to me have been men. And so it's an interesting thing to say that, but because of the industries, especially when I was working on Capitol Hill, so few women there, women of color, that it was men that have really helped me learn how to navigate through some of the unspoken rules of the game.
Wow. For me, it has been Asian woman, Latina woman, and then some men too. And these are some of the 3 and 4 big mentors in my industry, for me, in the media industry. What has it been for you, Rosette and Manu?
Well, I actually turn to my family a lot because most of us are artists, and I have 4 brothers. I have no sisters, so I grew up with mostly men in the house. And I must say they're very brilliant and so respectful. And I really look up to them in the way that they go about things. So I would say my brothers, and also I also grew up in a practicing Buddhism. So I follow a mentor named Daisaku Ikeda, and his principles within art, Buddhism and art, has been really inspiring to me. How to go about unity and justice within music. It's really profound. So that's kind of been it for me.
Mentors are great. I've had a couple. I've had different ones at different moments in my career that have been very helpful and insightful. Thinking on it, I've had a lot of I've had one woman mentor and one guy, I've gotten both perspectives, and it's been great. It's been great to, again, be a little, speaking again from just like industry, being protected, having someone there to be like, hey, no, you don't have to do this, or hey, you should do this, or this, or come here. This is a safe space. You don't have to go to the studio where you go in and it's fucking 15 dudes that are like, take a shot, because everyone here took a shot. And you're like, I came to work. Like, I'm not taking a shot, and it's like those kind of scenarios. So yeah, those I've been very blessed to have beautiful mentors that have guided me. And
love it. Well, our audience have been super engaged. So we've had some questions submitted for each one of you, and I would love to read some of them. So this one is for Laura. How can a woman of color get started in tech these days, especially with COVID not allowing some of us to get internships, which has been the traditional way to get your foot in the door? This is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a challenging time across the board for industries. I would say for individuals, women who are interested in tech right now, I think that there are some creative ways that you can start building experience that will allow you then to get a foot in the door once the environment has changed a little bit economically. So think about how to get involved with an organization where maybe you can volunteer and work on a tech project for them. So some of the nonprofits that are in need right now, is there a way for you to do a volunteer experience that will allow you then to like add something else to your resume? There are a number of organizations like Latinas in Tech. There's another one. I can't think of the name of it right now. It'll come to me in a minute. But some of these nonprofit organizations that are focused on helping bring together software and Latino software engineers, Latinx software engineers in a way to where they can learn how to network. They share tips on what they're doing in their job search. So I'd encourage you to think about that as well. And then for Google, we actually have our website. It's called I'll give you a sec to grab the pen, but it's buildyourfuture.withgoogle.com. And you can go to our website and get information there about some of the opportunities that are available at Google through our internships, and then also for job postings as well. But I'd really encourage you to be creative in terms of how you get out there and get experience in this time. There's a lot of need. And so if you can take your skills and use them for good right now, and then it will allow you to build experience for a future job.
Love that. We have another audience question, and this one is for our artists, Manu and Rosette. What advice would you give to all young girls wanting to start in music right now and not playing to the conventional stereotypes and instead focus on the music itself? This is everything that you've been discussing tonight.
I'm like going through my psyche of things to say. I really feel like young girls who are wanting to get started right now, there is a lot of focus on identity because there's so like TikTok or like there's so many things that move so fast, like thumb scrolling on another level. And I am also a part of that. Like, we'll just thumb scroll through things, but so many ways to compare yourself. I would say really do your research on yourself, really connect to your ancestors and their history, and connect to your roots before comparing yourself to anyone else, because your own story, your own experience is yours, and you give yourself permission to do whatever you want with that, no one else. So
yeah, it's so weird because it took such a long time for me to be like comfortable being like sexy, which is like such a weird concept in my brain. Like, now I'm 26 now, and I'm just starting to be like, okay, I'm gonna own my sexy, I'm gonna be, you know, I'm gonna show it off, all these things. But I feel like for any young girl that's starting, you don't have to do, goes back to it, don't do things that you're not comfortable with just because you think it'll sell or it'll not, whatever. Focus on your music, focus on your art. A thing I've seen is that when things come from a really, really honest, genuine place, people connect. And to not be looking around into what everyone else is doing, as Rosette mentioned, like identity, you know, take the time to figure it out, to find yourself, to know what you want to talk about, how you want to be perceived, what you want to show, not necessarily portray, but show and be. And that it always comes from like a genuine spot. Going back to my quote when we first talked, when you're there and you're genuine and you're real, and you like are doing your thing, people can't deny you. You know, you can't deny when something's just like dope. So that would be my advice on that, to just like come from a genuine place, do what you want, be yourself, and like express it and be unapologetic and do you. And that's it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. She said that's it.
And I love how you're both saying to know yourself first, because if we don't know ourselves, then we start copying other people and not hear ourselves and really, what do we want to tell the world? How do we want the world to perceive us? So I think that's amazing advice, and advice that can be really put into work in all industries, whether that is in tech, whether that is in the music industry, in media, etc. Before we leave, I want to thank you all for being here, for being candid, for getting real, for sharing your perspectives, and for really opening up to this discussion, and for it to hopefully be the first of many that we have, not only here, but with our families, with our friends, because really this is a domino effect. This is just one conversation, and then every viewer has immediate family, has different social circles. So start asking those uncomfortable questions, start asking those questions that we may not be, maybe we don't know the answer to, but at the end of the day, they just simply open up the floor for us to discuss more. And before we leave, I just want to thank the audience also for being here and for being so engaged with us, and for taking the night to share this moment with us. I want to ask you to donate not only your time, but also your money to different causes that are working towards women of color in power, and really giving the resources for more women to be in positions of power and to grow into the women that they've always dreamed of becoming. Some of these I'm going to be reading from some of the organizations that we want to share with you. Guerrera and our NGO Travel with Purpose partnered up with women's clothing and lifestyle streetwear apparel brand Viva La Bonita to launch a scholarship. And the scholarship basically helps Latinx, Black, and Indigenous girls accomplish their goals. The information is below, so please click and start donating and really putting your efforts into this scholarship that will help so many young girls. You can also donate to the GoFundMe, which 100% of its proceeds go to the scholarship fund. Again, the information is down below. You can also donate through the links below to different countries affected by the hurricanes, Eta and Iota. Honduras, Nicaragua, Peru, and most importantly, voting. Voting is extremely important. If you're not registered to vote, please do so. If you're turning 18 by January 5th, you can register to vote in Georgia and really make a difference in the Senate runoffs that are happening in January. If we flip those two seats, then the fate of the Senate basically relies on flipping those two seats. So again, these are some of the next steps that you can take to really keep the conversation going and really taking action and not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. Again, thank you for everyone for tuning in, and really don't forget to mark your calendars for next week's Conciencia Collective Talk. Reminder that this is a monthly occurrence, and this month we're talking about women, but next month we'll be talking about another topic that really concerns both of our communities, the Black community, the Latino community, and all the intersectionalities between those communities. So again, thank you so much for joining me and us, and let's keep the convo going. Thank you all for being here. Amazing mujeres poderosas, jefas in all your own right. So keep up, like Laura says, yes. Keep up the good energy.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.